Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparutade sangamatassa tawara ye sodavanta bamunjantu satang. So this is, I've short time left here in New Hampshire. In a couple of weeks I'll return to England. And I just want to express my appreciation for all the generosity, interest that you've shown, both the Sangha and the lay communities. And I've given a lot of reflections on the deathless, because, and especially in a non-Buddhist country like this, death is very much our real world, where we identify with things that cease. And born and grow old, get sick and die. So this sequence of birth and death is important. Like in monasteries in Thailand, the monks reflect on this every puja, on the beginning and ending of conditioned phenomena. So conditioned phenomena is the illusions that we hold about ourselves and the world that we experience through the body, through the senses. And then we talk about the deathless, the Dhamma, ultimate reality. But when we call it ultimate reality, then it gives it a kind of superlative quality, which is not accurate to describe the Dhamma. And in fact, you can't describe the Dhamma. It's apparent here and now and timeless. It's the deathless. It wasn't born, doesn't die. So the whole point of the Buddhist teaching was to awaken to that, realize Dhamma as your reality rather than the illusions that you're conditioned to grasp and believe in, and find happiness and grief and fear and aversion and greed and all the condition, all the qualities we imagine that we create in terms of conditioned phenomena. So conditioned phenomena is made very clear that it's impermanent. And so in meditation, like in Vipassana meditation, insight practices, it's to verify this. And so we start observing just how everything changes. This is autumn season, it's moving towards winter. Coming over here this afternoon in the evening, and I just noticed the barren trees, where only a few weeks ago they were full of leaves and colorful leaves. When I first arrived here in August, they were all green. And now the sense of the ending of something that began, that was born, when the leaves start producing, when the trees start producing leaves. And now those leaves are on the ground, they're dead. And so in terms of just witnessing this, not just taking it for granted, that everything that has a beginning has an ending. And that includes every thought, every view, opinion, concept, belief system, every emotion, whether it's pleasant or painful, has a beginning and an ending. And then this witnessing the birth and death of phenomena is a practice, is a path, what we call the path of non-suffering. So we take refuge in Buddha, which is the witnessing ability that human beings have to observe change as we experience it through the senses, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and think, our emotional habits. And consulting, we're trying to talk to people about people who've experienced the death of a loved one, grief, and of course, when a loved one dies, then grief seems to, they usually feel they're going to be depressed forever because they miss the person that died, and the attitude is, how do you get rid of grief? Rather than being the witness to grief. Because everybody that's grieving knows that what grief is. It's an English word that we use for that kind of feeling of loss of loved one, separation from the loved, is like this. So this year has been a kind of ongoing experience of loss for me personally. So my sister died, my friend and supporter in England, George Sharp, died, and yesterday we received news of Ajahn Sumedho, an English bhikkhu who passed away in Thailand. And an ongoing experience of my supporters in Bangkok that have been supporting the monasteries for years, passed away. Luang Por Chah died, and on like that. So that there's always a sense of loss when somebody dies. And it is impermanent. It's not a permanent state, but oftentimes we create problems around grief because we oftentimes feel guilty when somebody close to us dies, especially a mother, or father, wife, or husband, or child. We can always look back to how we, the mistakes we made or the problems we caused our parents, and feel guilt about it, or we can just feel, well, somebody, that we don't like dies, and that's good riddance. That's not grief. So, but who's witnessing this? Whether it's good riddance or I'll be grieving forever, my loss, I can never, that's going to be permanent state when it's not. And so, and it's not to just believe in the concept of impermanence, but to witness it. And this is the Buddha, the Buddha position, taking a stand with witnessing the experiences that each one has, whether they be pleasant, painful, success, failure, good, bad, right, and wrong. If we take the position of the Buddha, the Buddha, then we can actually witness the experiences that we have to have in these human forms. So the deathless, when we talk about the deathless, amatta Dhamma, deathless reality, is an absolute reality, ultimate reality, deathless. You can imagine deathlessness. When you try to describe deathlessness, you try to do it. See if you can find an English equivalent or meaningful descriptions of deathlessness. So death is an experience that we all have, at the end of our lives when these bodies, when the occasion occurs, circumstances come together, then the weakness of the body fails and it passes away. So this is a witnessing position, which is the deathless reality that we take refuge in when we take refuge in Buddha. Bhutang saranang gacchami. And that's part of any Theravada tradition, whether it's Thailand or Sri Lanka or Cambodia or Burma, the Pali tradition, everybody takes refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. So it becomes ceremonial, part of a religious ceremony, but it's much more profound than that. That's the surface. Those are the words. And so by trusting in awareness, and then we begin to have insight practice, what we call jnana dassana, insight into the way, into ultimate reality. We can't describe it or find it, but we can realize it if we observe the changing conditions that we experience. So like your eyes are impermanent and the objects that you see are all impermanent, and that goes through the ears and the smell, taste, touch, thoughts arise and cease. And by continuously contemplating this until you have the insight, because you can believe in impermanence because it's in the scriptures, but that doesn't really resolve the problem, because when life is disappointing, when there's failure or death or loss, then if it's just a belief, then it becomes rather cynical. Everything is impermanent, doesn't matter, a kind of passive attitude, cynical attitude towards loss. Life is all about, everybody's going to die, and that's just the way it is. And so it can be kind of resignation to the facts of that what is born dies, but not understanding, not having insight, having jnana dassana. These are the Pali words for insight into the ultimate reality, which is possible through awareness. So there's so much emphasis now in the mass media on awareness or mindfulness, which didn't exist 30, 40 years ago. And now I see that as a good sign, that with all the problems, personal problems, family problems, political problems, international problems that are in the media that we pay attention to, because we find it interesting, or we feel strong emotions, taking sides with one side against the other. We get caught in our prejudices, our biases that we were conditioned with, without witnessing it. Now, witnessing is not judgmental. It's not about right being better than left or good, and everything should be good, and there shouldn't be any bad. I've heard people who lose their faith in Christianity because they feel God disappoints them when some loved one passes away, and they blame God for this natural reality that whatever is born can die. We all think, well, when we grow old, that's fair enough, but sometimes infants die and children die, and then in the news you hear how many children were killed in a mass murder by somebody, and you think it's children dying or our own children. It's not fair, and then we can feel a disillusionment with Christianity because of that, because God shouldn't have allowed that. We can carry on with our views and opinions about it. But that doesn't really awaken. Wisdom doesn't awaken through just operating through the conditioning that we cling to and we identify with. So awakening is when we begin to trust in a witnessing position. And being the witness, no, it's like this. It's not judgmental. When the Buddha taught about the way things are, it's not about how it should be, where everything's fair and just and benevolent and moral and kind, and all problems can be solved with reasoning and discussions and we have ideals using the positive superlatives to describe how life should be. But awakening to Dhamma is all conditions are impermanent. And that includes the good and the bad, the right and wrong, heaven and hell, angels and devils. It's not about the deathless being just for the good people, or if you're good enough, then you won't die. If you're virtuous and positive about everything. But how many of us can be totally good? And is that one's experience in terms of the past? From the day you're born, do you walk on 7 lotus leaves and live a completely virtuous life? Or children learn through experience of failing and starting again. Just watching a young child learning to walk. The mother can say, "You've got 2 legs, you can walk. Get up and walk." And it does have 2 legs. But it first has to crawl and develop the strength through the limbs to be able to pull itself up on the furniture or something, take a step. So it's a growing experience of trial and error. So we learn from errors that we make, from things we say that we regret later, or on and on like that. We learn from that. Hopefully, if we don't, then we go through life with being deluded and totally missing the opportunity as a human being to awaken to Dhamma. So when we talk about Dhamma being ultimate reality, translated into English, the Pali word Dhamma, or absolute reality or reality, that's still using words, whether they're Pali, Sanskrit, English, Chinese, or whatever. They're still words, and words are impermanent. So if you believe in Buddha, you can't believe in Buddha all the time. You have to go to the monastery and ask a monk to give you the refuges and on like that. And then you assume you believe in Buddha, 24/7 all the time, your whole life. So that is a kind of belief system, or oftentimes called faith, blind faith, without inquiring into exactly what do you believe in. Is a belief something that you can trust and it is stable? Or beliefs are creations, they're artificial. They're not ultimate reality. The word Buddha is an artifice. It's a word. But what is the reality of Buddha? When we use the word Buddha, is the witnessing position that we begin to trust in and stabilize. We stabilize in this witnessing reality that is always available, whether you're healthy or sick, young or old, male or female. It has nothing to do with the conditions that individuals are experiencing, because it's whether you're a success or a failure, whether people love you or hate you, everything is witnessed to from the position of Buddha or Buddha, knowing Dhamma, that whatever it is pleasant or painful, being successful or failing, is like this. It arises and ceases. So does the witness arise and cease? Well, we don't take refuge in the belief that I am the witness, that Ajahn Sumedho is witnessing Dhamma every second of the day. That's an assumption. But it's, when we talk about witnessing, it's just the simple reality of being conscious. So a conscious awareness is the most obvious thing it's a fact that we can trust in. We all know we're experiencing consciousness at this time. So consciousness isn't something personal. It's not like my consciousness and yours. That's a creation. When you create me as somebody separate from you, that's an artificial perception that is conventional, but it's not wisdom. It's just a conventional reality that we operate in these conventional forms. But the aim is to not be just attached to conventions, because they're all disappointing. So that as long as our world is a conventional world, we're going to suffer from it, because it's going to be disappointing. Growing old isn't something that we want. Poor health, we want to be healthy and strong. We want to be approved of and alive. We want to be successful. And these are all natural desires in the desire realm that we tend to take refuge in our desires. So the teaching of the Buddha was to understand the desire. Is consciousness a desire? Is it desire arises in consciousness. So we have desires that arise in consciousness, but consciousness itself doesn't have desires. So we're getting to realize our nature isn't the things that arise or manifest in consciousness, but they're the changing conditions that we're experiencing. We can call it our karma, or the way things are. And it's like this. So I remember with Luang Por Chah in Thailand, he was emphasizing to me right from the beginning, before I could really understand what he was talking about. I did manage to through a translator, understand the way it is. And this impressed me because it was a confusing time for me to experience, learning another language and adapting to a completely different culture and way of life than what I'd been operating from before. But it's like this. So, just determined to take this stand in this witnessing position. And then is to trust in this. So when I chanted the gate to the deathless is open, after I chanted Namo Tassa, I said, Aparuta de Sangamatassa Tawara, the gate to the deathless is open. So then the rest of it is about trust in this. Release your faith, trust in this. The door is open. It's not just a belief, but what is it? It's to be investigated, to find out for yourself, the gate to the deathless. So this gate to the deathless is conscious awareness. It's simple, that we all, it's not a mystery or something terribly refined that is beyond anybody. It's just not observed because of the cultural conditioning. So we're conditioned after we're born, we're conditioned by our parents, what they believe in, and we tend to adopt that because we don't know any better. We just absorb the delusions of the society and the worldly conditions that we get from our families, from our social status, from our religion. And then we operate in kind of grasping these conditions without reflection, how they are impermanent. Like a belief is a very impermanent thing. It arises and ceases. But when we talk about taking a stand or trusting in the awareness, that's not a personal position. It's not like I'm doing it. I'm just trusting it to be the witness of what I experience through this form, through this old body. It's like this. And without judging it. And that, at first is hard to do because I was brought up in a very judgmental culture. And so I'm culturally attuned to passing judgments of what's right and what's wrong, and strong beliefs in how things should be, and critical of when things aren't the way they should be, and being educated too. You develop this, so much information. And the United States is a very idealistic country. So it's a country where we are affected by the idealism of it. And so at this time where there's so much conflict in politics, it's because people are caught in their beliefs of right and wrong, and the news is all about what somebody said, about condemnation or criticism, blame. And that's the culture that we are born into if we're born in this country. is it right or wrong? Then we take a stand. We can believe it, if we're very patriotic, that we're always right, or if we're critical and we see, hear news about things that, Americans have done that were wrong, we can feel very upset, disillusioned with the country we're living in. And so we're caught in this whirlpool of right and wrong, good and bad, blaming the American culture. It's about anybody can be president of the United States. Everybody's equal. And so even if you're from a very poor background, you can become president of the United States, which is the ultimate, a great success in American culture. So this is, and then if everybody's equal, then why is there everything so competitive and everybody wants to be a winner? Because if there's winners, there has to be losers, and they're not equal. So being a winner is what we're aiming to be successful in our relationships, in our business, in our life, raising our families to be successful. And we love competitive sports and things where people win or lose, because and war itself is exciting. When we talk about perfect, harmonious peace, it's not exciting. So it's not sensational. There's so much emphasis on sex, and because sex is exciting, it's interesting and exciting. Romance is exciting. Having adventures is exciting. But so much of life is not exciting or romantic, but boring and tedious. And so we have the technology now to always look at exciting films, blockbuster videos, and on like this, that there with a lot of war, violence, and sex and adventure, and it's entertaining. And nobody wants to look at a video of something that's boring. So, because boring is what we don't want in our lives. And yet so much of life is boring. How many exciting adventures can you have, or how much sex can you enjoy, or in good food, or win contests or whatever in one's lifetime? Then when we're caught in that delusion of success and failure, winners and losers, then we're bound to suffer, because we're attached to extremes of perception. And so much of what we perceive through these forms isn't exciting, sexual, adventurous, romantic, interesting, but it is the way it is. And boredom is impermanent. So when we talk about peace, when I was a student in Berkeley, I joined several peace movements, and they were active in 1960 or so, and I wanted to fight for peace. And of course, Berkeley's a heaven for protesting and ideal causes. So, I went on marches carrying a peace sign, and I joined the American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker organization, very peaceful, very idealistic. And, because I'm I wanted the best for the country. And the idea of peace was a problem, because at that time there was a lot of conflicts, as there is now. So we, on one of these marches, and living in and experiencing these peace organizations that I was a member of, you realize that none of these peace activists were very peaceful. And then I realized I wasn't peaceful. And I was very confused and very, caught up in judgmental opinions. And so, this is when it was like an insight. Suddenly I witnessed how the confusing experiences I was having while demanding peace from the American government. And suddenly it seemed absurd, what I was doing. Because, if I couldn't be peaceful, how could I expect the American government to make things peaceful for me? So my interest in Buddhist meditation developed strongly from that kind of insight. And that insight was just witnessing confusion in myself, disappointment in the peace movements that I was a member of, blaming them because they weren't, the people in them didn't seem very peaceful, and criticizing that they should be peaceful themselves. And then that always going out looking at somebody else and conceiving how they should be according to my opinion, and that's not peaceful. It's a very confusing state to be in, to always be passing judgments on others, taking sides. So it's a interesting time for me, because it was an insight for taking the position of witnessing rather than just trying to make myself peaceful and some kind of deliberate effort to be the ideal peace marcher that I imagined. So what is peace? Is this monastery peaceful? And do you come here to find peace in the monastery, and then when you go back to the city, or peaceful? Is the peace you experience here might be peaceful place, but you don't witness it. You take it. You cling to it. When you expect to come to this monastery, you don't want to get caught up in conflicts. So this witnessing position, taking a stand with Buddha, or taking refuge in Buddha, awareness, conscious awareness, doesn't demand that everybody be peaceful. In Wat Pah Pong, I remember with Luang Por Chah, there are always conflicts in the Sangha. And in lay communities, and he thought with somebody so wise as Luang Por Chah, everybody be peaceful. But he did have a good effect on the local villages and towns around. But to really take the stand, take refuge in Buddha, not many were willing to do that and be the witness to the way things are. And what is the way things are is all conditions are impermanent. That's just the way it is. And being impermanent is not a judgment, is it? It's not like good should be permanent, bad should be impermanent. that's another artificial creation, and that's how it should be. But the way it is, this experience of birth that we're all have had, growing up, the age that we identify with, the age of the body is like this. And this witnessing of age isn't old. So in terms of the body, this body sitting here talking is, conventionally speaking, 88 years old and 3 months. So I'm in my 89th year, the body is, and it's like this. So, like my vision, I have to go to the eye doctors and get injections, and I've lost the central vision in the right eye. So, like I can chop off your head just by shutting my eye. and the other eye, the left eye, is just being saved. I can still read and things, but I have to have magnifying glasses or read from an iPad with big letters. But it's this suffering. If I take it personally, then it is. But I don't want this vision to be like this. My personality, my ego wants to have perfect 20/20 vision all the time. So on a personal level, I don't want to have old eyes that are fading or ears that don't hear very well, and I can't walk very steadily. I have very numb feet. I have neuropathic problems in the lower extremities of my body, and I don't like it personally. And if there's a vaccination or a pill available that will fix it all, I'd be more than glad to try. But so far, I haven't found any miracle treatments. But also taking refuge in Buddha, I don't suffer. Because my refuge is in the deathless reality of conscious awareness, not in the fading out of a physical form. But it's good to know, like with awareness, we're aware of the ego. You're not the ego anymore. You're not limited by the conditioning identities you had about your appearance, your gender, your race, or cultural identities, or that you're not. Those are limitations, artifices that we grasp. And when we don't grasp them, then our real identity is awareness, conscious awareness. But we don't take that personally. Like the Dhamma is all conditions are impermanent, all Dhamma is non-self, non-personal. So, sape Dhamma anatta. So consciousness is not personal. It's universal. It's unitive. It's what we all are. And then the forms that manifest in consciousness are not what we really are. They're impermanent conditions, empty phenomena, arising, ceasing, being born, and dying. So this kind of teaching is very profound, it's very wise. It's a simple Buddhist teaching. Sometimes Buddhism sounds very complicated, very complex. And there's so many scriptures and commentaries and different kinds of Buddhist traditions, and it's a very old, ancient religion. So, in terms of the external forms of Buddhism, it can be very complicated, but its very essential nature is very simple. It's the waking up to Dhamma. all conditions are impermanent. If you really, and no, that's not a belief anymore. It's through witnessing the changing conditions that I experience in this form, this human body. And there's nothing I've found that is permanent. And the ego that doesn't want to have poor vision or deaf ears is impermanent. It's not what I hold to or believe in, but I know it as a condition. Not judging it, it arises and ceases like any other condition. But knowing the ego, you're not that limited ego that you tend to believe that you are. You're not bound to these limitations, to these artificial conditions. When the opportunity to wake up and realize Dhamma, absolute, ultimate reality, or what is, it's not, absolute and ultimate, as I've said before, are superlative in the English language. It's not superlative, it's here and now. It's not high and refined, and only a few highly spiritually developed people can realize it. We might believe that. How many of you believe that you're not very spiritually evolved, or that you're not good enough to realize Dhamma? Or, we do see ourselves oftentimes with feelings of, the monks are something special, but we're not. I still have so many kind of worldly desires, and that's all conditions, opinions, and views that we cling to. When we believe that, then we become that way. We limit ourselves to what we think and believe we are. That is always the result is suffering. The first noble truth. And so the first noble truth is a statement, not a belief. There is suffering. And so when we don't want to suffer, my ego doesn't want to suffer. In the body, it still suffers even when, you get childhood diseases, and, in the Sangha in Thailand, I had malaria several times, and that's a very unpleasant disease. And I used to have, my right foot was damaged when I was in the Peace Corps, and so the lymphatic system in the right leg, it's never operated very well, so it swells up, and you get cellulitis. If you get a cut in your foot and it gets infected, then the whole leg swells up, and you have to go to a hospital. So, and I don't like that. I don't like cellulitis. And then I ordained in Thailand after the Peace Corps, where you go barefoot. So as a layman, I could wear nice shoes and protect the feet, but as a Buddhist monk in northeast Thailand, you go barefoot. Or in Bangkok, you go Bindabad in Bangkok, you go barefoot. And so then I had to be very careful, because if I stub my toes or cut my feet, then it easily get infected. Cellulitis can be very dangerous. You get very high fevers. And so, this is, nobody wants this. The body, you want your body to be healthy. You don't want to be subject to malaria or COVID-19 or anything else. You want good health and strength. So that's the ego wants that. That's desirable. And it is desirable. But desirable is a judgment, it's what we want. But the way it is like this. Like neuropathic problems with the feet are like this. Makes it difficult to walk. And then seeing poor visions like this, hearing is like this. And there's no suffering. It's just the way things are. When you detach, when you take your stand with Bhutto, with witnessing, rather than with the desire to, or the resentment of getting old, or the limitations you find yourself in, or the embarrassing, humiliating experiences of old age, and on like that. Nobody wants that. So as an ego, I don't want it. But I know that that's the ego. What is it that knows that is a condition that arises and ceases? Is awareness, conscious awareness. So is it wrong or right? Should I not care about what happens to the body? That's another position. I should be content is a very ideal for monastic life. You should be content with the 4 requisites. And so you have, when you ordain, you're celibate, you give up sex, you have robes and shelter for the night, whatever that might be. So the standard is bangsa kula cloth or rag robes. And the Buddha established the robe standard on just the lowest possible cloth standard you can think of. So rags that the lay community has thrown away, or in India they wrap the corpses in cloth, and we're allowed to take that cloth and make robes to cover the body. Shelter for the night is the root of the tree, and you think of living, as it's getting cold here. Winter's coming, living at the root of a tree in New Hampshire. So we are very grateful for the kutis and the shelters that are made available to us. And food, alms food that people give. And so we oftentimes criticize for eating meat, because there's so many, being vegetarian or vegan is so non-violent and peaceful. But then the Buddha and the Vinaya didn't want us to become vegetarians, but available to whatever food was available, whether you go to an untouchable hut and they eat meat, or a Brahmin vegetarian, you receive what's offered, is the general ideal for it. Food offering, what's dropped into the alms bowl. So medicine for illness is fermented cow's urine. So for all these illnesses that I have, I've never had to take fermented cow's urine. And so, I have very good doctors, and I'm a veteran, so I get care from the Veterans Association, VA, and in England they have health care freely available. And so, the medicine, I always had the best medicine, the best food. Most of my life I've had good shelters and nice robes. So this kind of reflection is a way to be grateful, develop gratitude as an alms mendicant. Because people always offer. I've lived in very poor villages in Thailand, and these poor people will give the very best food they can possibly find to give to monks. So you're not just eating waste food or having to strip corpses of cloth to make a robe, but when you reflect on these very low standards allowed by the Buddha, then we're allowed to receive cloth, for good material to make robes if somebody offers, or a kuti, a shelter for the night, and on and on like that. It's not a breaking rules, but it means that we develop a sense of gratitude, what they call katanyugataveti, because our life is dependent for the basic necessities for survival on others. And then to be content with that. So as an ideal, I would think I'm content. But witnessing, I could witness discontent. Like the food, I didn't like the food. I could witness that. Then the idea as a person, the ideal of I should be content and grateful for what's offered, is still part of the thinking artificial process. But the important thing is to recognize discontentment, not try to make yourself into an ideal, but to learn about discontentment is impermanent and not self. And when you let go of discontentment, when you recognize it, then you experience contentment and peace. Because conscious awareness is peaceful. It's not interesting, but it's peaceful. And in old age, it's very wonderful to have peaceful minds. So that, you rather than a discontented one that is full of regrets or disappointments or feelings of loss or betrayal by friends or resentments of the past. When you meet old people, they oftentimes have so much bitterness about disappointments in relationships, or they feel like their failures are not successful like they should be or wanted to be. And so, in old age can be an experience of great suffering. Or through taking the stand in awareness, Bhutto, or the Buddha, taking refuge in the Buddha, then we are this awareness itself, which isn't disappointed, where disappointment might arise, but your identity is no longer with the manifest conditions that you experience. So you don't attach to them. You let go if you are attached. And if you aren't attached, then the memories of the past, unpleasant memories of the past can still arise, but there's no attachment to them or resistance to them. They arise and they cease, they end. And so the ending of conditioned phenomena, to be the witness, to just internally, how thoughts arise and cease. Be aware of boredom as opportunity rather than as trying to distract yourself from it. Witness it. Boredom is like this. Or discontentment, dissatisfaction is like this. And just by this simple way of reflecting, you see the ending. What arises inevitably ceases, and that's the way it's supposed to be. All conditions are impermanent. They're empty and impermanent, and what is ultimately real is Dhamma, here and now, apparent here and now, and timeless. So I offer this as reflection for this afternoon?